A lot of people have this idea that if they want to go see an exotic place, that somehow they need to travel outside the United States, but that couldn't be further from the truth. We've got beautiful mountains, awesome deserts, but one of the things people don't really talk too much about is the fact that we actually have rainforests in the United States. This spring, my partner and I flew from South Carolina all the way to the Pacific Northwest. Our destination was Olympic National Park, which is the home to the Hoh Rainforest. We started our multi-day backpacking trip on a trail called the South Coast Beach Trail. This trail runs along the western boundary of Olympic National Park, and its terminus is actually the Hoh River, which flows out of the Hoh Rainforest. Because our trail took us right along the coastline, we spent about half of our time hiking on the beach. The other half, the trail would essentially peel up off the beach. The entire time, it kind of felt like we were going up into the forest and then back down onto the beach, and up into the forest and back down to the beach. You're kind of trying not to fall off the side while you slip up these eroding trails. There were a few times where it was a little bit sketchy trying to climb up and down these rope ladders that would basically be there for support. To me, it was really cool how it felt like there were two different hikes actually melded into one experience. When we were on the beach, it felt like an alien world. Now, I come from South Carolina where the beaches are flat and relatively featureless, but the beaches out here, they had all sorts of natural stone arches. There were really cool tidal pools where we spent a little bit of time kind of searching around, finding different little sea creatures. It's one of those places when you first look at the rocks, you might not think that there's a lot growing there, but there was actually a ton of life. I believe my partner Gates was actually the one that spotted a bald eagle, and he let us get right up close to him. I learned later on from a friend that the Roosevelt elk, which is the biggest subspecies of elk, lives in Olympic National Park. While not all of the forest hiking for this trip was technically in the Hoh Rainforest, it all had that signature lush greenness that was pretty much everywhere. That forest is dominated by Sitka spruce and western hemlock, but there were a handful of other kinds of trees. It really did feel more like a jungle than it did a forest. It felt like there was moss growing on virtually everything. After a few days of hiking, we made it to the mouth of the Hoh River, which is where it pours into the ocean. The Hoh River is fed by glacial runoff, so it's got that iconic rich blue color, and with all the trees and the green happening around it, it just was an awesome sight. We wanted to take a little bit of time and spend our last night in the Hoh Rainforest proper, so we headed up into the main section of the park and headed up the Hoh River Trail to camp along the river for that night. After our first few days of hiking, it felt like at this point we were truly in the heart of the rainforest. The moss got thicker, the trees got bigger. It had a really distinct feel, and you could tell this is a place that got a lot of rain. I ended up looking it up, and the Hoh Rainforest gets 3.5 meters of rain annually on average. That's over 140 inches.
Part 1.
It's really cool to kind of be out of the beach area and closer to the mountains. We can see some high alpine, snowy peaks and the lush green of the rainforest. So this is a really nice place to end our trip.
We got some hot smoke.
Our final night of camping, we ended up getting a sweet spot right on the river, and we pretty much had the place to ourselves. Again, that was a surprise to me because this was one of the prettiest places I've ever hiked, and it's in an iconic national park. And yet, once we got about a half a mile from the parking lot, we really saw very few people at all. I think a lot of people would be amazed that if they get a little bit further off the beaten path, that they'll find some of the best stuff there is to find. And if you're looking for solitude, generally you don't actually have to walk that far. You just have to be willing to go more than a mile or so, and the amount of people you'll see will drop off dramatically. All in all, it was an awesome trip. I would go back in a heartbeat, and it felt like we got a diversity in hiking. It was kind of everything that I'm looking for when I go out for a short section hike. Make sure you do your research and make sure you're following permitting guidelines, but I highly recommend getting out there. While we're on the topic of rainforests, I actually want to talk about a different rainforest that I've been spending a lot of time in. I live in South Carolina, and my local long trail is called the Foothills Trail. It's about 77 miles long, and it runs through the foothills right around the South Carolina-North Carolina border. This area is about an hour from my home, and I found out last year that it's actually technically a temperate rainforest. It gets between 80 and 90 inches of rain a year, and it has a lot of the same features that we found in the Hoh Rainforest, where there's really lush greens, it's very humid, and the biodiversity is off the charts. I thru-hiked this trail a few years ago and kind of fell in love with it immediately, not just because it's so close, but because it really does have a ton to offer.
All right, it is day 6 on the Foothills Trail, and we've been hit with our first rainstorm. We're gonna try to enjoy it even though we're a little bit soggy today. As you can see, the trail is absolutely running with water, and everything that I have is soaked. But this is just part of the experience.
I am super pumped to tell you guys that I've been working on a feature-length documentary about the Foothills Trail. That's going to release in the late summer, early fall, and we've been working on it for several months now. The goal of the film is to talk all about what the trail is, what the trail community is, in hopes that we can inspire people to get out there, but also build a culture of what does it look like to protect that space and to protect that trail for future use. I'm really excited for next week's video because I'm going to be releasing the trailer for that film and tell you guys a little bit more about the project, how I've been filming it, and where it's ultimately going to be found so that you guys can make sure you stay connected. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate all of the support, and I can't wait to introduce you to the film next week. So until next time, stay well and happy trails.